Okay, students, on this video, I'm going to explain the first section of the module. You were assigned exercise 2.1 through 2.7, but I'm going to make this video and summarize exercise 2.1 through 2.5. And then if you look at the video series, you'll see the next video for an explanation of this section here of exercise 2-6 and 2-7. So for 2-1, the first thing it tells you, it's really just to open the module, start Civil 3D Imperial, by the way, that is what the software you need to use. And then we're going to open module 2, and it's going to ask you to notice break lines and mask points. Okay, so what is it talking about there? What it's talking about as far as break line and mask points is that it's talking about these. So these are actually AutoCAD polylines, except they're 3D. So that's what it's talking about as far as break lines. A break line is considered a term in the industry for these lines. It's just a line with vertical information, and I'll explain what vertical means in a little bit. So step 3 just says to notice the break lines and the mask points, which are all of these. All of these points are the ones that it's talking about as far as the mass set of points that's inside your drawing. Okay. And then the other thing it tells you through there that while you're inspecting the data, it tells you to, well, first of all, look at this cul-de-sac. So there's a cul-de-sac in here. It looks like there's a main road in here and a cul-de-sac. So it's just really telling you to just look and see what that is, okay? And then the other thing on step 6 is to click somewhere on the break line. Now, somewhere in there, it told you to turn on what's called the coordinate readout, okay? So as far as the coordinates settings, it's this guy right in here. So by default, it's not there. By default, you actually have to turn that on, and it had you click on this button on the bottom right for customization. And once you click customization, it tells you to turn on the coordinates. So because it's usually off when you start the software, so it just tells you to simply turn it on. So that's what it told you. Because through there is when it goes through step 6, where it says to click on the break line somewhere, okay? So if you notice, when I move the cursor around, and this coordinate is in X, Y, and Z format. So the X and Y is moving, but notice the Z is 0, okay? So then what step 6 says is to place your cursor on one of the grips. So what you do is you select one of the lines. Those the blue dots, those are called grips. And I'm not going to click on it. I'm just going to I click the line, but I'm going to simply hover over one of the grips and pay attention to this one number here. This number here is going to change. That number is an elevation. So once I move around here, notice the 0 is going to change to 348.4290. When I move, it goes to 0, and I kind of go over here. And this is 346.5430. Okay. So what it's saying is that these lines actually have elevations to them. They actually have elevations. The handout doesn't tell you to do this. I'm just going to kind of show you this myself. Is if I were to put this into 3D, and I'm doing this by holding my shift key and my middle wheel, and I'm revolving it around, this information is actually in 3D. And by doing that, you can kind of see the road in here. It's almost like if it's kind of in a hill type of thing, kind of cut out of a hill. You can kind of see this area over here is a little low. It looks like almost like a little arroyo down in this area. And then over here to the right, it's just a little higher, okay? So the handout doesn't show you that. I do it now just to kind of show you that it's 3D data. It's like a surface. It's like a piece of land somewhere out there, okay? So that's what this is. And that's what I was referring to as far as elevations, because if I grip on one of these right in here, that 0 again changes to a number, 350.2740 in this case. So these are 3D polylines, and the points too. If I grip the points, same thing. This one has a 344.8470 elevation. Okay. So that's what's basically on exercise 2-1. Okay. 2-2. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a surface. Okay. So to do that, it tells us to type menu bar and then change the setting to 1, because we're going to be referring to pull down menus. Okay. So the pull down menus are actually these way up in here. These are the pull down menus, all of these. Not these. These are our ribbon tabs. So we're not going to be talking about those. Whenever I refer to pull down menus, it's one of these up in here. Those are the ones that we're going to refer to on this handout, and that's what we're going to be using for those pull-down menus. So by default, they're not there. So like the handout says to type in menu bar, you're going to type in menu bar and change the default value of 0 to a 1. So right now it shows 1 because you can see it, but if I put back to a 0, that menu bar disappears. Okay. 0 or 1. The other way to turn on and off that menu bar is if you click on this arrow right in here. This one here, you just simply hide the menu bar, or you click on here and show the menu bar. Okay, so it's really the same thing. So as far as the exercise, it says to select the create surface from the surfaces pull down menu. So you're going to go up here to the surfaces pull down menu, and I'm going to click on here and create surface. So by doing that, it's going to bring up this box, and the handout says to name it right in here. We're going to change this one. If I were to just hit OK, it would call it surface 1. If I create another surface, we call it surface 2, and that's what this means. But it wants us to name it existing ground. Existing ground, okay? And then it's talking about a tin surface. So as far as the type of surface, it has different types of surfaces we can create. The type of surface we're going to be working with is called a tin. A tin, the handout does not say this, but I will tell you, it's a triangulated irregular network. Tin is a triangulated irregular network. So what's going to happen, it's going to create a surface with a bunch of triangles. That's what it is, okay? So just to give you that information, just simply make sure it says tin surface, existing ground, hit OK. And that summarizes exercise 2-2. Just simply create the surface. Notice that there are different types of surfaces. Make sure it's highlighted as tin. Create surface, and there you go, okay? The only other thing it tells you that to find when you create it, how do you find where it's at? You just go over here to the left on the tool space. It tells you to go over to the prospector tab. And then if you expand surfaces, you'll see that existing ground surface that I just created, okay? That wasn't there before that one step. All right, so that's exercise 2-2. Exercise 2-3, define the surface, okay? So that surface has no data inside of it. That surface is blank. There's nothing there. I just simply created the surface. But there is no definition to it. So then that's what this step is talking about. So on this step, on exercise 2-3, we're going to define the surface, okay? So like it says right in there, find the existing ground surface over here on the prospector, surfaces, existing ground. You're going to go in here and we're going to define it. And you're going to define it with, there's different ways of defining that surface. So if I go over here and expand existing ground definition, there's different ways of defining that surface. And to see these a little bit better, you might have to scroll this over to the right or to the left, because sometimes you can't really see it too well. So I'm just going to put my mouse here and scroll it over to the right. So we're going to define this surface two different ways. The first one is with break lines. So I'm going to right click under break lines and add, and I'm going to put a description of EG, pretty much a step five. It says EG, existing ground. Everything else you leave alone and you hit OK. All right. So at this point, it's getting ready to, it's asking me to select all my break lines. So I'm just going to put a big window around everything. Okay. And again, and I can select it again. I just click once. Don't press and hold the mouse. Just click once, move everything down and select. Okay. Now, pretty much like it says in the handout, it's only going to select break lines. So if I zoom in here, all my points are not selected. I can try, but it won't select them because right now we're adding only break lines. Okay. So we're going to do that in this step, and then we're going to come back on the next few steps and add drawing objects. But at this point, you just hit enter. You get this weird message from a panorama, which is just a message board telling you a few things that it found. It looks like there's a couple of duplicate points. More than likely, there's maybe some polylines that cross each other and stuff. So there's really nothing major. So we can just check this and leave it alone. So we're good. Okay. So this is where I'm going to do something different because I want you guys to realize what's going on. At this point, we have now created a surface. Okay. So the surface is now defined. called existing ground. And if I highlight this yellow polyline, that's really the surface, but you don't really know what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it in 3D once again. And by doing that, now you see your tin. This is the triangulated irregular network. It's a bunch of triangles. What are these triangles formed from? It's literally going from that. You remember how we had all those break lines? It's literally going from one dot to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, and forming a massive amount of triangles. And the other thing too, if I change this from 2D wireframe to shaded, it's actually in 3D. So I can come in here and rotate this thing around. You can see the roadway that I was talking about a little while ago. If you go over here to the left, you can see that arroyo was talking about. Oohs and ahs are okay at this point. You can ooh and ah if you want to. Okay, I hope so, because this is pretty neat. So this is now the 3D surface that I just created by defining break lines. Okay. Now the thing though, it's not triangulated to these points yet, which is the next step on the exercise. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go back to the top view. Okay, I'm going to take this back to 2D wireframe. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do something else too. On this view, I'm going to go to existing ground, and this is not part of the handout. I'm just adding some additional information. I'm going to right click under existing ground and edit the surface style. And under the surface style, I'm going to go over here to display. And right now, the only thing that's displayed is that yellow border. So that's why you only see that yellow border on this view. So I'm going to go turn on the triangles and apply so we can see them from this view. Okay. So notice the triangles are not triangulating to the blocks, the points. Okay. So then that's what the next step is on the handout, where it says you right click, add break lines, which we did already. So I'm going to right click and add drawing objects. Okay. But then the only thing it tells us to pick a particular drawing object. In this case, these are blocks. Okay. So these little X's are specifically AutoCAD blocks. Does it help us put a description? Well, even if it doesn't, it's really existing ground. So I'm just going to put an EG and put OK. And it tells you to put a big window around everything once again. But in this case, since I'm only working with drawing objects, specifically blocks, that's the only thing that gets highlighted. Okay. So I'm going to put a big window around everything. And I'm kind of curious why it's not picking the blocks. And hit OK. Okay, I did something wrong. Add blocks, EG. Okay. Window around everything. Okay, yeah, that's what should have happened. So I guess I picked something wrong on that last step. So once again, I'm adding blocks. Now they're highlighted, and pay attention to the triangles. They are going to change a little bit. So now that I'm adding the blocks, I'm going to hit enter. The triangles are now reshaped to include the blocks. Okay. So I'm just basically adding more data to it. Okay. You're not going to see anything real dramatic from the last one with only the break lines. It's just that we added more data. Okay, we added more data. So now to include all those blocks. All righty. So hopefully that makes a little bit more sense to you at this point. And then exercise 2.4 and 2.5. Okay, I'm going to combine these two, but I'm actually going to do them backwards. I'm actually going to go skip over to 2.5 and then come back and do 2.4. Okay. The reason I'm doing that is because on 2.5, it tells us to display the contours for that surface. Okay. So then this surface, let me go back, put this back to 2D wireframe. Remember how I went in here and it has you go through these steps. So just follow along on the handout, but I'm just going to go edit the surface style. And what it's doing on exercise 2.5 is telling you to just simply display the contours, which is the major and minor contours. So I'm going to turn off the triangles. And I'm just going to display the major and minor contours, which is what I had you do on step exercise 2-5. Okay. And the border here, that's what this yellow thing is. If you want to take it off, you're more than welcome to. It won't affect anything. It's just simply a display. Okay. All right. Now, before I get too far, that's exercise 2.5. I'm going to show you some more data that's involved in surfaces. The surface actually has other data, for example, slope arrows. So I can click on here and display the slope arrows on that surface, and it tells us which way water is flowing. Okay, that is pretty neat. I'll tell you right now, that's something in civil engineering that we actually had to display what's called flow arrows whenever there's rain and it rains on this dirt and it's running down the hill. We need to, in civil engineering plans, we need to show which way water is flowing. So we would actually draw these in by hand, drop in the arrow and rotate it, drop in the arrow and rotate it. And the rule is the arrow is always pointing perpendicular to the contours. It's showing which way water is flowing. So whenever you create a surface, ladies and gentlemen, it's actually creating a lot of data, and it's very interesting, very intense in what it does. I'm going to edit surface style and turn those off. But there is all kinds of data that's attached to these surfaces that, and I don't want to say automatically, but it does happen automatically once you create the surface and define it. You're able to analyze a lot of this data. So just some additional information that's not part of the handout. Okay. Exercise 2.5 is talking about labeling the contours. And you're going to label them with a add surface labels, contour multiple at interval. Okay, so you should have done this already. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to surfaces, add surface labels, contour multiple at interval. And then what I'm going to do is after that, I'm going to pick an imaginary line from one corner to the other. And what it's going to do, it's going to label the contour elevation at this point and at this point and at this point. And then it tells you to type 500, meaning from this point, 500 feet away is going to add another piece of text. 500 feet away is going to add another piece of text. And that's going to be for every single contour. So this process, once we actually do it here in the next second or so, it looks like it's going to freeze when you go to added surface labels, contour multiple interval. I click a point from here all the way to the bottom here. And then it tells us from that line, how far along do you want me to add another label, 500. Enter. And then your computer looks like it's freezing or doing some weird things, but it's just that it's labeling it with text. So it's pretty intense what it's doing. So there you go. Okay. So that's our contour labels to give us the elevations of these contours. These are also movable, and you can move the label if you ever needed to, and it will rotate it along the contour. The label line itself too works actually live, meaning I can actually pick it from here and then move it, and it'll move all my labels if I wanted to. Okay, so it's pretty neat. That's pretty neat. So that's really in summary what it did for exercise 2-5. Okay, now I'm going to go backwards because it talks about the precision of the contour labels. Okay, so I'm doing it backwards because I wanted to put the labels there first and then adjust the precision. The reason for that is because this precision on contour labels are usually to the nearest foot. So we don't label 0.000 on contours. So to do that, according to exercise 2-4, it wants you to go to the settings, the surface styles, label styles, contours, and the style that we're using for these is the standard one. So you right click on that one, edit, and it's kind of like how we did the labels with bearings and distances. You move this around just for preview purposes. You go to the contents, and don't forget that that is going to be done from the layout tab. You go to contents, click on that one, click the little code. You notice it has a precision of 0.001. Delete the code, change the precision to 1, reinsert the code, hit OK. It adjusts this so that all our contour labels don't have the 0.000 anymore. So in summary, that's exercise 2-1 through 2-5.